All right, welcome to UARC. For those that don't know me, I'm Bruce Faraday, KF7OZK, and Marvin Match was not able to come. Apparently, he hurt himself, so he'd have an excuse not to. No, he had an accident and isn't able to make it tonight. So we want to welcome everybody out, especially those that are on the YouTube and following us that way. Tonight we have, do we have any new members here? Anybody here new? Let me come up and introduce yourself, call sign, and license class, things like that.
My name is Gabriel White, technician, class KK7OPE.
All right, welcome. Any upgrades? Anybody go from technician to general to extra? Nope. All right. Well, I was going to ask on classes, but I don't see anybody that gives the classes here tonight. I don't know, is Morris doing any classes, do we know? No. You're doing classes? Yes. Okay, why don't you?
Hi, my name's KK7AVS James. I'm doing technician classes right now. I'm doing them through Zoom, so if you'd like to learn more about them, feel free to shoot me an email at kk7avs@gmail.com. I have those Monday nights at 6:30. So feel free to shoot me an email if you want more information, but as well, I also do general classes. I hold them over the air. I hold them on the Salt Lake Crossroads 2-meter repeater, 147.160 megahertz, positive 600 kilohertz offset, and a PL tone of 127.3 hertz, Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. So feel free to check in if you'd like. I review 38 questions each week from the general class exam pool. And I'll definitely do any one-on-one and help you out in any way I can to help you pass your general license or even your technician. Thanks, Bruce.
All right, and thanks. I do know that there are a lot of classes out there, and anybody want to upgrade or sharpen your skills or whatnot, jump into them. Ricky Asper, who is does our books. Apparently he's not able to make it tonight. If you go on the website and if you want a book that some obscure book or catalog that's available through ARRL, and if you give him a call, give Ricky Asper a call. His number's in the on the website for officers. He can probably get it for you at a discount, no shipping charge, things like that. So, yeah, wait for the next order, probably the next meeting. Yeah.
And maybe Noji might have some classes you might want to ask.
Okay, Noji, you running any classes?
Yeah, we've got classes down in Orem happening here or there. One starts on January 23rd for technician. We got another one for general in March, and another one for extra in July. So here and there, and they'll be published in the microvote and posted on the website, on Facebook, that is.
All right, thanks. That's good to know. Since we have this major storm this weekend, the last couple of days, I think Noji's running out of Utah County because it's a little bit of a challenge to get up here. So that is what I had for tonight. Our next meeting will be on February 8th, and the discussion is going to be on the setup of the 14662 repeater that has two functional locations, one on the Ochre Mountains and the other one's on the Wasatch up above Brighton, and they work synchronously. And they are, that's a unique situation at how they've set it up. And they will actually, based on where you're at, where the other people are at that are talking, they'll pick and choose which one they're going to use, because the one on the west side will reach out to Tooele, where the one on the east side won't. The one on the east side can reach clear up to Evanston and other parts. So that's going to be kind of an interesting thing. And I would like to welcome, it's Kevin Bargenbuck. Okay, I was going to slaughter that name. And he has been a meteorologist. He works with the National Weather Service here in the Salt Lake Valley, all right? And he is here to talk to us about storm spotting, and Skywarn maybe? Yeah. So, you know, if you were able to spot the storm yesterday and the day before, I mean, that helps out, because they told us it was coming, and they were not far wrong. So here is Kevin.
Appreciate that. Yeah, occasionally we get it right. We try. So up front, hopefully everybody's had a chance to pick up a couple of these forms. So we've got the white spotter registration form. We ask you to fill that out. Even if you've had training before, and I do recall visiting with this group and doing some training a few years back on the evening of a rain event in the valley and a really big snowstorm up in Suncrest where I live. We like to get refreshed information and make sure that everybody's been trained within the past 3 to 5 years. So that's how we keep people in our database, or we purge them if they haven't done training for a few years. So please complete that. The other sheet here, this sort of orangish yellow sheet, is our reporting criteria reference sheet. So you're welcome to take one of these with you. Hang on to this. It's sort of just a quick summary of the things we want to hear about at the office and the ways to report that information to us. And while we don't have many left in publication, I do have one Weather Spotters Field Guide. These are also available online. So I will leave one copy here for folks just to look it up. If you go to the NOAA Publications page, you can actually have access to that. All right, by way of introduction. So, yeah, I've been doing the meteorology thing for a while now. So I started in the National Weather Service in 1988, which means I'm just about to 36 years. A lot has changed. My interest in weather started in Nebraska. I grew up on a dairy farm. We were dryland farmers, so we needed rain. Either that, or my brothers and I just needed a break from baling hay and walking beans and all that fun stuff you do on the farm. So we were always hoping for rain. And then occasionally following storms. My dad has an interest in meteorology as well. I went to school at University of Nebraska at Lincoln. My younger brother David followed, so he's at the Boulder, Colorado forecast office. And then my cousin Brian Bargenbrook, who grew up down the road from me about a half a mile, is at the Omaha office as a meteorologist as well. So it definitely runs in the family. Oh, and my brother's wife is a meteorologist too. So she did broadcast meteorology on air and then switched over to emergency management a couple of years ago. So when we get together, in short, we talk a lot of weather. My wife absolutely hates it. So, that said, we're going to talk a little bit of weather tonight. We're going to go through, 60 or 70 slides. That might sound like a lot. We'll plan on spending an hour. I'll take questions as we go. This is very informal, so if you've got something, just throw it out at me. I'll do my best to answer it. Up front, if you're complaining about the weather, I do apologize. The last couple days were a little bit interesting, you might say. Snow squall warnings and heavy snow. So actually, we kind of got a break that tonight is the quietest of the nights because we have yet another storm moving into the region tomorrow night. Not a lot of interest there, sorry. Okay, so for this evening, we're going to do a few things. We'll look at some weather terminology, talk about extreme weather criteria. Then we'll look at how to correctly identify significant weather features, talk about what information to report to our office and how to report it. We'll touch on some ways to get information from us as well, our web services, our social media feeds. and just highlight a few spotter safety tips along the way as well. So a little bit about our office. We're 24/7. Our mission is the protection of life and property. So just about everything we do, all the partnerships we build, the training that we do is tied to that mission. We have a really large, what we call county warning area, our area of responsibility. It's all of Utah except for the 4 easternmost counties. Those belong to the Grand Junction office. We also have Uinta County, Wyoming. So we have the second largest county warning area in the lower 48. So you can about imagine the size of our area with the terrain that we deal with poses some pretty interesting challenges, and we'll talk about those along the way as well. But before we get into actually, what you need to do in terms of spotting, I thought it might be fun to sort of revisit some past weather events that we've had throughout the state of Utah. So we can start with the severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. Now, again, I grew up in Nebraska. It's all about traditional severe weather there. But tonight we're going to talk about sort of the spectrum of weather hazards that we have to deal with in Utah. But we do get the occasional severe thunderstorm. This was an event that happened in the West Jordan area, a microburst wind event. Knocked down a bunch of transmission poles, distribution poles, 3,000 people lost power. State Route 111 was closed for that event. About $300,000 in damage, so a pretty significant event by Utah standards, maybe not by Oklahoma or Nebraska standards. But definitely something to be aware of. Duchesne County tornado was an interesting event. Just back in June of 2022, an EF2 tornado. So the EF stands for Enhanced Fujita. That's a scale we use to classify tornadoes. 0s being the weakest, 5s being the strongest. Fortunately, it was in essentially the wilderness area, so no structural damage, but you can get a sense here by the power of that tornado, just by the number of trees that were felled. That tornado was on the ground for a little over 2 miles and about a half a mile in width. Now, in northern Utah, if you go back to 2016, September 22nd, we had a tornado that was in the Riverdale and then moved up through Washington Terrace into the South Ogden area, just clipped Hill Air Force Base. That was an EF1 tornado, track length about 3 miles, about 50 yards wide. 5 injuries reported with that tornado, so a fairly rare event for Utah. Fortunately, it's one of the things I like about this region. While we do get the occasional tornadoes, we've had very few injuries through the years, and just one fatality, and that was the Salt Lake City tornado, August 11th, 1999. This one did about $2 million in damage, so pretty significant event for Utah. That same day in Panguitch, we had an EF1 tornado as well. That tornado was a little bit smaller and according to the track length, about 3/4 of a mile, about 25 yards wide, $300,000 in damage. So again, I grew up in Nebraska. We're used to tornadoes. When I came out here, they said, they almost never happen. So the odds of 2 tornadoes hitting 2 different towns in the same day was pretty remarkable. It was a pretty long odds. So definitely an interesting weather day. Now, a bigger concern out here in the West are floods and flash floods. So if you look at nationally in 2023, 77 fatalities from floods. Unfortunately, in Utah, 5 last year. 4 of those alone were in Buckskin Gulch down in southern Utah. So one of the things we worry about a lot here are the flood events that occur in the slot canyons, and we'll touch on a few of those as we move through the training tonight. If you go back to 1950, 61 flood fatalities. So the number one weather-related killer, though, is actually lightning. Now, because storm chasing is not probably worth it for most of the experts in Utah, we do have a focus on flash flood chasing. So David Rankin, who is now with the federal agency, was one of those individuals, and he took this picture of, unfortunately, a pickup truck stuck in some flood waters. So a few events come to mind. So Capitol Reef National Park back in 2022, a really active year for the monsoon, by the way. 60 people were stranded during this particular event. Several vehicles washed away. We'll look at some videos a little bit later on. about $110,000 just in vehicle damage from that event, but fortunately no loss of life from this event. Goblin Valley State Park, not so fortunate. So 2 fatalities, both children, back in 2020 in Little Wild Horse Canyon. So again, here we go again with the slot canyons, and it's definitely a concern for us. And we spend a lot of our time working with the state parks and our national partners at parks, monuments, and recreation areas to make sure they've got the weather information that they can pass along to their visitors. And especially make sure that they're actually getting our warnings. And then probably the most tragic event in Utah history, the Hilldale flash flood event in 2015, September 14th. And so 13 fatalities with that event, 3 injuries, $750,000 in damage, but that was really insignificant compared to the loss of life. And that was just one of those situations where the folks that were down there did the right thing. They stopped at a crossing that was flooded. They were waiting it out, but then there was another storm that moved across upstream. The second wave of water came down, got behind the vehicles, and swept them away. And then last year, you might recall this event, the Draper flash flood, and I live in Suncrest up there on the top of Traverse Mountain. Big rainfall event. We had over 1.5 inches of rain in 30 minutes. It's pretty significant for Utah. Sent a bunch of water down the mountain where most of the flooding actually occurred. 428 residences were impacted, 11 businesses, and then city infrastructure. If you tallied it all up, the damage was over $15 million from that single event in August. I mentioned lightning earlier. So 2023 lightning fatalities across the country, just 13. So a lot of outreach, a lot of education, a lot of resources have gone into educating folks about the dangers of lightning. So fortunately, we're really seeing the lightning fatality numbers decline. And once again, we had no lightning fatalities in Utah in 2023, but still 67 fatalities since 1950, so more than floods and flash floods. Wildland fires are, of course, a concern. Varies very much by the year in terms of what the fuel conditions are, whether or not we get a monsoon season. 2017, we had the Bryan Head fire, over 70,000 acres burned, 13 homes destroyed, $36.6 million in costs associated with that fire. Much of that was just in terms of getting that fire out and under control. 2018 was an incredibly active year fire-wise. We had the Dollar Ridge fire up in the northeast corner of the state, Duchesne County. Nearly 70,000 acres, 74 homes destroyed, $25 million in property damage, $18 million in suppression costs, and then over 1,100 people evacuated that fire. Fortunately, no loss of life, but we have had fatalities from wildfires in Utah in the past. That same year was the Bald Mountain Pole Creek fire in Utah County. Really late season fire, started in August, but burned all the way into October. Altogether, over 100,000 acres burned, nearly $24 million in suppression costs, 6,000 people evacuated. And then we have to talk about debris flows as well. So when you get these wildfires, if they burn hot enough, and we look at the burn severity, the soils can become hydrophobic, so the water cannot infiltrate into the soil, which really sets them up for flash flooding and debris flows. And in some cases, if it's steep terrain, as little as 1/3 of an inch of rainfall can produce a debris flow and or a flash flood. This image, actually the 2 images on here, both from the Dollar Ridge fire in Duchesne County. And there's an area up there called Camelot Resort, and the fire was actually still burning at the time. And we knew that there was some potential for debris flows and flash flooding. We weren't fully aware because we hadn't had a chance to get out and look at the terrain. But we had a rainfall event, sent a bunch of water into that resort. 30 adults, 13 children had to be rescued. They were helicoptering folks out. Very, very fortunate that we did not have any loss of life with that debris flow flash flooding event. Other hazards we deal with, downslope windstorms. especially from this area, northern Salt Lake County, northward. I know that the university here has been impacted with some winds of 70 to 80 miles an hour in the past. And then right up through Davis and Weber counties, that's sort of the heart of where we get these downslope wind events, where essentially we've got these stronger winds spilling over the Wasatch and then funneling down into the valley. Most pronounced along some canyon areas, so like the Farmington area is a suspect for incredibly high winds. Couple big events come to mind. September 8th, 2020, 99 mile per hour wind gust in Farmington. 1 fatality with that, 16 injuries. Still trying to figure out the damage, but it was well into the millions. 50 semi-trailers overturned, nearly 200,000 power outages, interstate closures, school closures. So really, really impactful weather event when we get those downslope windstorms. And the other big one that comes to mind was December 1st, 2011. 102 mile per hour wind gusts recorded in Centerville. That was before the anemometer broke, so it could have been even a little bit stronger. $4 million in damage to public infrastructure, $78 million damage to insured property. Again, 50,000 homes and businesses without power, interstate closures, school closures. Again, super, super impactful event. And then winter storms. Last year, a monster year. I should have included a picture of my home up in Suncrest. I live at 6,100 feet. I had about 20 feet of snow. If you were at Elta, they set a record with over 900 inches, over 90 feet of snow, I think, something like that, if you do the math. These are actually images of an ice storm, something I was told would not happen when I moved out here in 2004. You know, and again, I grew up in Nebraska, big ice storms in Indiana and Ohio before that. Also really significant ice storms there. Came out here and this almost never ever happens. Probably nothing impactful. Well, on this particular day, temperatures were in the lower 20s. We got about 1/10 of an inch of rain, strong valley inversion events, or really cold at the surface. So essentially the northern half of Salt Lake County up through Davis and Weber counties into the Cache Valley region all experienced this pretty significant freezing rain event. 557 reported accidents. Those aren't fender benders. Those were like major accidents. 300 injuries. The airport was shut down because a plane slid off, so something to be aware of. And we'll talk about reporting freezing rain events and really precipitation type in general as we go through the training. Any interesting stories to tell or any questions about any of the weather events that I just covered? Sure.
Second question, how long after a fire does soil remain?
Oh, great question. So once you have a wildfire, you know, how long is that area susceptible to flash flooding and debris flows? And it depends on a couple things. One is just the revegetation process, how long that takes. Another thing is just how steep that terrain is. The rule of thumb is 3 years before the hazard passes, but we've had areas like from the Sealy fire, if it's rugged terrain in a drier area where we're getting debris flows and flash floods 5 years later. Then we have other areas like out in Tooele County from a fire where it's a little bit lower elevation, revegetated pretty quickly, only really was a concern for a year or so. All right, so some days I feel like this. So I wasn't around when this picture was taken. I mentioned I've done almost 36 years now in the National Weather Service. But the idea here is that, so in the past, we were sort of inward looking. And in today's National Weather Service, we would much rather be out and about, sort of meeting folks in the communities, learning about what impacts them, understanding their needs. So we work with this really wide array of partners in the state of Utah. So snow safety officials and mountain resorts. You can about imagine last year, given all the snow and the avalanche dangers, we spent a ton of time working with them. The national parks and monuments and recreation areas that I mentioned, the interagency fire centers, the emergency managers, whether it's at the city, county, or state level, or even federal level for some events, our tribal nation partners, our military folks. So we spend a lot of our time out and about in the office, and that's really my job. So I do outreach and education. I help manage the office operations, and when the weather's really quiet, they let me work some operational forecast shifts. Basically, you know, me working a shift is sort of flies in the face of protecting life and property these days. Now, it wasn't always that way. I used to be an operational meteorologist when I was in Indiana. I was one of the guys when there was a big outbreak potentially coming, and they'd say, Kevin, we need you on the radar, or Kevin, we need you doing the forecast grids, and getting that information out. Where these days I spend much more of my time out and about, again, working with the communities that we serve. So, getting to the spotter training side of things, why do we need spotters? And there's a few reasons. One, probably the primary, is to help overcome some of the limitations of our radar coverage. Now in Utah we have 2 radars, one on Promontory Point, that radar is at over 6,000 feet. The other radar is down by Cedar City on Blowherd Mountain, that radar is at over 10,000 feet. So the northern Utah radar, the lowest elevation out is 0.0 degrees. The southern Utah radar goes out at 0.2 degrees. And then you factor in there's curvature, plus the radars are on mountainsides. Well, guess what? You're not really seeing what's going on at ground level very well. And that even applies to some degree in the Midwest, where the radar network is much more dense and you don't have the elevation issues. You still need those reports in terms of what's going on at ground level. Now, when we get your reports, we use those in our warnings, our follow-up statements as well. So there's a big difference, I think, between saying Doppler radar indicated a tornado on the ground 5 miles southwest of Salt Lake City versus saying a spotter reported a tornado on the ground 5 miles southwest of Salt Lake City moving to the northeast at like 20 miles an hour. At that point, we figure hopefully people take action with just a warning regardless. But if not, if they get that report of a tornado on the ground, they're going to do something now. Is it going to be to take shelter, which they should be doing? Hopefully. But then again, they might be going outside to catch a picture or a video. It's been known to happen. So when we ask for reports from you too, always keep safety in mind first. The third thing we do, and the third reason we need your reports, is because we use them in our warning event simulations. It's part of the training for office. So our forecasters will be going through the environmental conditions for the day, the radar imagery, and then we're feeding them with reports as well in those scenarios. So it's basically, okay, what's informing their decisions? And so that's sort of, it's not the primary reason that we want reports, but it is helpful just in training operational forecasters. All right, the laundry list of things we want reported to our office here. So tornadoes, funnel clouds, wall clouds, of course, the traditional severe weather, flooding, flash flooding, stronger damaging winds, hail, wildland fires, snow, freezing rain events, marine-related weather events. So it's quite a list there of things we're going to go through this evening. When you report, remember the 4 W's, who, what, when, and where. So identify yourself as a trained spotter. Now, we will take reports from just about anybody, but if you're a trained spotter, your report's going to carry a little bit more weight. Describe the severe weather feature, the what. Provide as much detail as you can. The when, let us know the time the feature was first spotted and if you're still seeing it. And then be as specific as possible with respect to your location, the where. So, you can reference town, distance and direction from town, interstate or a state highway mile marker, a marina, anything that you think our forecasters can use to really zero in on that area is helpful. And then continue to monitor reports. So if you're seeing something, keep an eye on it until it's no longer a threat. Lots of reporting options. Our severe weather spotter line, 800-882-1432. If you dial that number, you'll start to get a recording. Just hit 1. You'll be taken right to a forecaster within our office. That's one way. There's a storm reports option on our web page, which I can show you when we're done here if you have an interest. So you can just submit electronically. You can send us an email. Probably best to use like the day after an event though, because if it's a busy weather event, you probably don't want us digging around our email looking for reports. And then social media, Facebook and X, and there's a couple other options we'll talk about on the way. So what's missing here? We don't have any amateur radio operators working out of our office right now. Now we're working on a remodel, we call it tenant improvements. We're hoping to set up a workstation. And I don't know if it's something that we'll use a lot like we did in the Midwest, but we'd at least like to restore some of the equipment. We still have some radios in place. They're just not in use at the moment, and maybe have some procedures. Maybe somebody that for the big event could come in and operate the net from our office. But if you as a group want to just, coordinate through whoever, is operating the net in this area, or even statewide if it's a large enough event, then that person can take that information and call it into our office as well. So we're not going to dictate how those reports come in, but just as long as we're getting those and as close to real time as possible, that's what we're looking for. One other option, this applies to more than just severe weather, but the COCORAS network, Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network, is another way to report information. It's a little bit more structured, so we look for consistent reporting of rain and snowfall amounts. There's a URL here as well. I can actually make a PDF version of this available for the group if you want to post that online. That would be an option. And just hit that URL to get started. And then Mike Seaman, one of our senior forecasters or lead meteorologist in the office, can work with you. And then there's another MPING network, which is through the NOAA National Severe Storms Laboratory Partnership and the University of Oklahoma. Unfortunately, I'm a Nebraska guy, so even though we're in different conferences now, still got some issues with Oklahoma. But it's a good network for reporting things, especially hail and severe reports is one thing that they really look for. And then another option is if you have or are interested in getting an automated weather station, you can make that information available via the CWOP, or Citizen Weather Observer Program network. And then if your station's of high enough quality, then you can send reports or connect, basically share that information with us. And we can pull that information and put it into our MESWES system. So it's actually online on our webpage, and we can use that for monitoring in real time. So you might be wondering what type of weather station is appropriate for that network. So you can't just do the $70, old Radio Shack version, but you could do something like an Oregon Scientific or Davis Vantage Pro station. Now those stations are not cheap, but they might be affordable to you. Think $300 to $400 plus maybe another $100 to $200 for connectivity. Yeah. Pardon me? Don't know much about that system, but I could look at it. Yeah. Essentially, if it's one of those stations that's fairly reliable and fairly calibrated, and we can access that data, then we will take it. Now, if you're wealthy and you want to do like a Vizsla network, you might be talking 5,000 to 10,000. You could do a Campbell Scientific station, which could run anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000. We love that data, but that takes an agency with significant funds like the Utah Department of Transportation. They do sort of a road weather information system, which is sort of a collection of a number of different companies. They put their systems together, and they've got like pavement temperatures and precipitation sensors and wind and webcams, and we love that data. But in short, anything that gets us real-time weather information is appreciated. And don't feel like you have to do that. Oh, there are also handheld instruments like Kestrels as well for getting wind speed information. Okay, so shifting gears just a bit here. So we want to talk about anticipating severe weather. So what should you be looking for in a given day? Now this is this is a typical Utah tornado. This was up in Plymouth back in 2007, so just my third year out here. Of course, the tornado did really nothing but stir up some tumbleweeds. But there was an injury actually from this tornado because people are on the interstate paying attention to the tornado and there was a car accident. Nothing serious, but there were injuries. We employ sort of this ready, set, go approach. So think outlooks going out through like the next 7 days, sometimes even 8 to 14 days. Watches, okay, we're in closer now. We've got a degree of confidence that the event's going to unfold. And then warnings or advisories, which are basically, okay, it's happening. So watches are issued when conditions are favorable for a hazard to occur. Sort of a plan, prepare, and be aware. Now, the watch lead time varies tremendously by hazards. If it's something like a severe thunderstorm or a tornado watch, much shorter lead time, maybe on the order of only 2 to 6 hours versus like a winter storm watch, where we might have an idea that the storm's going to impact the region 3 or 4 days out. Warnings, okay, it's imminent or already happening. It's basically take action now to protect life and property. And then advisories, it's happening or it's imminent. But advisories are kind of in that realm of if precautions are taken, there's not really a significant threat to life and property. I know it's a kind of a gray area. The Weather Service is actually probably going to transition away from advisories over the next couple of years just because there's sort of a confusion factor there. But just so you know, if you see like a flood advisory, okay, yeah, there's going to be some flooding. We won't call it nuisance because it could be still impactful to property to some degree, but there's probably not a threat to life from it. So what can you look at? Lots of tools now in this day of information. I mean, just about everything we produce is available on the web. So you can go to our webpage, weather.gov/Salt Lake City. Weather stories are on there, kind of highlighting the concern of the day or maybe for the next couple days. Our radar imagery is there, satellite imagery, observed conditions from MESOWEST. There's just a ton of information available for you. So poke around our page. It's not super user-friendly. When you find things, bookmark it. We are working on weather.gov 2.0, which seems really weird to say because, you know, we've had a web presence for like 38 years now. We're just getting ready for weather.gov 2.0, but we're very excited about it. Hopefully it'll be a little bit more of a user-friendly experience. Also, my contact information will be on one of the final slides as well. So you're always welcome to reach out to me, and I can point you to something if you're looking specifically for a piece of information. YouTube briefings we don't do too often anymore. It would have to be a really impactful weather event. I mentioned the weather story graphics, our social media feeds. We are X and Facebook. There are some Weather Service offices that are Instagram now as well. No Weather Radar Hazards. We broadcast 24/7 from our office via network. That's also a feed into the emergency alert system. So if you have a radio, you'll pick up one of 7 different frequencies depending upon where you are in the state, assuming coverage. We have a pretty good reach, at least in most of the population centers. So that's another option. And of course, you can always follow local media sources, even national media sources as well for information. So what makes a thunderstorm severe? So we're going to start off with the traditional severe weather: tornadoes, winds of 58 miles an hour stronger, or wind damage, and hail at least 1 inch in diameter. As you're looking at events unfold, and you've probably seen this, they're just kind of, keep in mind there are 3 stages in the thunderstorm life cycle. There's that first stage, summertime, might be late morning, early afternoon, where you're starting to get the towering cumulus developing. They're slowly building. Lots of rising air within the storm at that point. The stage kind of lasts 10 to 15 minutes, and this is just generally a wag. Like it's, you know, every storm is different in Utah. Might be getting a little rain, might see some lightning. What we focus on for the most part is a mature stage. So that's when you tend to get your severe weather. So you've got, you know, the incredible vertical development of the cumulonimbus. You're getting lightning. It's when you're going to get most of your severe weather, whether it's the strong damaging winds, large hail, tornadoes. Of course, you can also get heavy rain at this point. When this thunderstorm is in a mature stage, at least for anything organized, that's where you have sort of interaction between the rising updrafts and the downdrafts within a storm. Stage typically lasts 10 to 20 minutes. Again, just kind of a general statement there. And then finally you move into the dissipation stage where that storm is essentially collapsing. Now at this point you could still have lightning, you could still have rain, you can certainly get damaging winds, especially downburst winds as that whole storm collapses. Probably not likely to get tornado formation at that time. So now we're going to start to transition into, okay, so what are some of the clues you can look at? Question?
Not a question. About 25 years ago, I was doing this kind of work with the weather people, and we had, in Heber, we had very strong wind come in, part of a thunderstorm. But it was very, very bad. And some people got some, at least trying to get insurance because they wanted first direction of first visit of the storm. But that was going on, for about a month. But I just thought, I thought I'd mention that to you.
Yeah, so I remember one storm during my early years. I believe it was an August 1st storm that moved through, organized supercell storm. Came across, caught the south end of the Salt Lake Valley. It hit Utah County especially hard, went through the Provo Municipal Airport. I believe the winds gusted to about 100 miles an hour with that storm, and then continued on eastward. One of those very rare, like, morning events. I remember driving to the office and seeing this incredible shelf cloud out ahead of it, and I thought, well, this sort of feels like Indiana again. And that, you know, so keeping in mind the damage that these straight line wind events do can be more significant, or at least as significant as some tornado events. And that particular event, a lot of media interest. I recall getting a few inquiries, and I went down and I surveyed the damage because I wanted to make sure it wasn't a tornado. And it was straight line wind events, but there were trees snapped, power lines snapped, garage doors that were damaged, roofing that was damaged. Again, so pretty significant. And when you get one of those events, it does take a while to assess all the damage for sure. Okay, so on to observing. So we're going to start, you know, back a distance from the storm, 30, 40, even 50 miles away. And you can look for a couple things. One of those is an overshooting top. It's a dome-like bubble of cloud material extending above the anvil. This will make a little more sense when I show you an image here on the next slide, lasting for more than 10 minutes. And that's basically just an indication of a strong updraft, a lot of rising motion within that storm, and that helps that storm to maintain its structure, stay organized, and produce severe weather. You can also look at the anvil characteristics, so thick cumuliform anvils with sharp, well-defined edges. Sometimes they have that bubbling look where you can just see it building. Those are indications that that storm might be producing severe weather. And so taking a look here, here's your, And that does not work when in Google Slides. So no laser pointer today. But the anvil up there extending from right to left across the screen. And then on the upper right there, you can see that overshooting top, that dome-like bubble of cloud material extending right through the anvil because of the really strong updrafts within the storm. So again, if you see something like that, potential for severe weather. Nice, well-defined anvil in the upper left image. In contrast, lower right, weak decaying anvil, wispy appearance. So again, if you get that well-defined anvil, capable of producing severe weather. Now, as you move in a little bit closer, you can start to see a few more features of the storm. So 10 to 20 miles out, you really want to start looking at the texture. Does that updraft exist? In other words, is there like a hard cauliflower appearance, a real vertically upright storm? Is it growing? Is it increasing in vertical? In the vertical, that's an indication of potential for severe weather. In contrast, on the right, soft, mushy appearance, vertically tilted as it being sheared apart by the wind a little bit of sunlight shining through. That one's probably not going to produce severe weather. Now, as you get in closer, so now you're within 10 miles of the storm, this is where you can really see the finer features of the storm. And there are some things to look for, like shelf clouds and roll clouds. Is there a downburst occurring? Is there hail within that storm? Do you see that white hail shaft or a greenish tint to the sky? And then, of course, you can get into the tornadoes, funnel clouds, and wall clouds. And so a couple definitions here. That rain-free base is that low, flat cloud base with little precipitation falling, but you've got the updraft towers above it. And then there's a wall cloud, which is an isolated lowering of the rain-free base, rotating and usually near the north side of the updraft. So, a couple of examples of shelf clouds, especially the lower right image is probably the most defined. These shelf clouds are low-level, horizontal, wedge-shaped clouds They occur in the leading edge of a thunderstorm. So when these clouds move across, and again, they're an indication of strong winds within the storm, but when they move across, you're going to get that increase in wind speed, a change in wind direction. It's going to be noticeably cooler because of the rain-cooled air, the evaporation that's occurring. Not a guarantee, but if you see something like this, there's a good indication that you're going to get severe winds with that storm if you see that shelf cloud. Now, a microburst is another way to get really strong winds down to the surface. So what's going on within a microburst? A microburst, first of all, is a downdraft from the thunderstorm with an outrush of damaging winds, and it can be caused by a couple things. So one could just be rain or hailstones, so raindrops or hailstones sort of dragging some of those stronger winds to the surface, but usually they're associated with some sort of evaporational cooling. So that rain is falling, and in Utah, fairly arid climate, generally the lower levels are dry. You're getting a lot of evaporation. That evaporation is a cooling process. That cold air is more dense and wants to sink to the Earth's surface. And then it hits the ground and sort of spreads out. Winds with these downbursts can be in excess of 100 miles an hour. So again, capable of producing tornado-like damage. Now, if you're estimating wind speeds, you know, we talked about having an automated weather station, or maybe you've got a handheld Kestrel to get wind speeds. That's fine, but you can also sort of tell, or at least estimate the wind speed by the damage that's occurring. So at 50 miles per hour is where you start to get structural damage, large branches breaking off. By the time you get up to 70 miles per hour, that's where you've got heavy to severe structural damage. So think, you know, maybe garage doors, roofing, you're getting trees or power lines snapped. So do keep that in mind. Now, at about 50 miles per hour, that's where we want to start getting reports, because we're recognizing that you may not even be in the areas with the strongest winds, but it's also good for our forecasters sort of to calibrate those reports with what we are seeing, what the radar signatures are illustrating. Obviously, we want to hear about any wind damage that's occurring. Now, again, if you can measure the wind speed, that's great. But if you don't, just estimate it and let us know. It's an estimated report when you call it into the office. In terms of hail, from a distance, you can look for a few things. One of those is white hail shafts or streamers. A little bit difficult to discern. If you look at the image on the right there, you can kind of see those little white striations, indication of hail. You don't know how big that hail is, but hail within the storm. Occasionally, you also get sort of a greenish tint to the sky, like in the lower left. And that is just because of the refraction of the sunlight by the hailstones. So do keep that in mind. Now, as that storm moves overhead, obviously at some point you're going to start getting hail. Now hopefully it's not like this stone which fell in Nebraska, just 150 miles or so from my parents' farm, 7 inches in diameter. So at the time had the record, I think it still does, for the largest circumference for a hailstone. And then this one occurred in South Dakota, so it set the record for weight and diameter. And this one was about 8 inches in diameter or so. So it kind of gives you an idea, though, how strong those winds are within that storm for those hailstones to grow like that. And they're usually ugly creatures, right? They're sort of an aggregation of a bunch of smaller hailstones. And then as it makes passes through the storm, it'll be rising. It'll be like collecting stones. It'll be freezing on, gets a little bit too heavy, starts falling back, melts a little bit, gets picked back up by the updraft, and up it goes. And so it can continually grow. Now, the largest hailstones that I've ever seen were about nearly baseball size in diameter. And it happened to be, just by coincidence, and I guess we were pretty fortunate when I was a kid that we didn't have any big hailstorms taking out our crops. But my brother and I had just gotten back, my youngest brother, the meteorologist. We were both in Indiana at the time. We rolled onto the farm. The warnings are out from the National Weather Service. We're looking to the north and west, and we're seeing shelf clouds coming out. We're seeing like white in the storm, some of the hail streamers, and we're like, we got to go to Dad, because my dad is baling hay at the time, and he's out in the fields, and so we run down there with our vehicles, like, Dad, we got a severe storm coming. You got to get home. And of course, my dad, being my dad, is like trying to put this tarp on the bale pile, and pretty soon starting to go ding, 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 these little small hailstones coming out. He comes rushing over to the pickup trucks. We tear down the road, get into the machine shed, and then just boom, we started getting these baseball-sized hailstones. I mean, they were denting the tractor metal. That's how big they were. So, unfortunately, did a number on our crops that year. But still, kind of fun to see.
So when we report hail, do you need the measurement by in inches or millimeters, or are you comfortable with nickel, dime, quarter, you know, the Midwest kind of methodology of what do we got?
The very next slide, yeah. So we like to get reports that are objective, like we know what you're talking about. So you can say 3/4 inch or penny. You can say 1 inch, quarter size. You can say baseball sized. What we don't like are things like turkey-sized eggs, which seems odd, right? You know, and so we had some chasers when I was in Indiana at the time, back in I guess it'd be the early 2000s, and they were amateur radio operators, and they were sending reports back to. We were operating the net from our office as well, and we heard turkey-sized, and we thought eggs, and then we heard broken windshield, and we're like, oh, it must be pretty big hail. And then what we really mentioned is, no, they were hitting turkeys while they were going down a gravel road going 70 miles an hour, and it shattered their windshield and imploded. So in short, though, let us know when you're reporting exactly what the size is. So stick with something that's easily identifiable. All right, on to tornadoes. So Dunlap, Indiana, in the area of responsibility when I was at my last stop in northern Indiana, from 1998 through 2004 till I came out here. Twin tornadoes, F4s, basically destroyed the entire town of Dunlap, Indiana. And this one's, the years is very easy for me to remember. It was the year I was born. So I don't know, this was just a couple weeks after that. So maybe a sign I was destined to be a meteorologist. Do they happen in Utah? Yes, we already talked about that. Salt Lake City tornado, August 11th, 1999, the one and only fatality from a tornado in Utah. Manti, 3 years later, another F2 tornado, I believe, at the time. So low frequency, but high impact if they do occur. So we definitely need to hear about them. So how do we get tornadoes? Well, a couple ways. One, they could be associated with a supercell storm where you've got basically a persistent rotating updraft within the storm. These are the organized storms. These are the ones that typically roam across the plains, the deep south. There are a few flavors of supercells. There's low precipitation supercells, high precipitation supercells. But in short, they're organized storms with rotation, almost always associated with some form of severe weather, be it a tornado, damaging winds, or large hail. When you get these storms, on the leading edge, so if you look to the right, lower right portion of the screen, that's where your shelf cloud, your wall cloud would be. You're going to get some lightning in that area, and then wind with that shelf cloud passage. And then as you move to the southwestern portion of the storm, that's where you would get your large hail and tornado formation possibly. So just know that if you're in an area of the storm that is getting large hail, you're also in that area where there could potentially be a tornado, and not the place to be if you are chasing. Now, we don't expect anybody to be like in Oklahoma to go out and chase tornadoes around. If you want to do that, I recommend another level of training. But if, you know, for the most part, we just expect you to report what you're seeing from your location. Keeps you safe, informs our operations. Just another way to look at it here as well. So rain and hail out on the leading edge, that's where your shelf cloud would be. And then as you move to the southwestern quadrant of the storm is where you get your wall cloud, that lowering of the rain-free base, and then the tornado beneath it. So again, this is your rain-free base right through here, that lowering, and then the wall cloud and the tornado, and then you've got the vertical development above it. Mesocyclone, we talked about that. That's that storm scale regional rotation within the storm. Another good illustration, though, just a still shot, but you can almost envision by the circular nature of the clouds, the rotation that's going, and then the lowering, the rain-free base, and the tornado at the ground. A couple examples. Upper right image of a wall cloud, again, lowering that rain-free base, rotating, watch it for 5 to 10 minutes. The one in the upper right is actually looking east from the University of Utah here. Did not produce a tornado, but was definitely capable, and eyes were on it for a while. The other one is the Ogden area back in 2008, again lowering the rain-free base. Now, we care about wall clouds because they can be a precursor to a funnel cloud and or a tornado. But only 5 to 10% of wall clouds, even in the Midwest, actually produce a tornado, but it's still something to pay attention to. Now, we've talked about shelf clouds. Those are associated with straight line winds. Oh, yeah, question. Sure, or comment?
I'm just wondering, so about these large weather phenomena, do they pose any hazards for aviation and high-flying aircraft?
Certainly hazards for aviation interests. If you think about the vertical development of a tornado, can be 10 to 15,000 feet, but the thunderstorm itself could be 50 to 60,000 feet up into the atmosphere, especially in the Midwest. High enough that the aircraft cannot fly over them. But the real hazard, the one we are most concerned about, is when these thunderstorms produce outflow winds that impact operations near the ground level. So if you think about landing an aircraft, you never want a tailwind, right? You don't want crosswinds. So definitely they do pose significant hazards to the aviation transportation system. And that's why sometimes, planes will be in a holding pattern because there are crosswinds that are being measured at the airport. They gotta hold, they gotta circle until we get the storm out of the area.
So I'm just wondering, do these weather spotters ever collaborate with airports, organizations related to aviation?
For the larger airports, not that I've really been familiar with because they have instrumentation, right? They're pretty much fenced off. So they're largely, the airports are out of bounds, if you will, to the general public. But for smaller airports, it's something to keep in mind. Like if you would happen to be at, just say Provo Municipal Airport or maybe even South Valley Regional Airport, and you're getting some strong winds in that area, we definitely want to hear about it, for sure. And then we have contacts with the airport managers. And in the case of Salt Lake City International Airport, we've got a number of ways to communicate with the tower, with the Air Route Traffic Control Center folks, with the Center Weather Service Unit meteorologists that are at the Air Route Traffic Control Center as well to share that information. Okay, so just quickly to kind of look at the differences here. So again, shelf clouds on the left side suggest downdraft and outflow away from the storm. They're moving away, the clouds, from the precipitation area. Kind of think of them as like a rolling pin sort of rolling out ahead of the storm. Wall clouds, on the other hand, now are associated potentially with tornadoes. They suggest updraft and infill into the storm. They hold their position with respect to the storm. And so think of a vertically orientated rotating type weather feature. Shelf clouds again, so here it is, moving out ahead of the storm, away from the rain area, straight line winds associated with it. In contrast, this wall cloud is going to be holding its position with respect to the storm. Notice that little tilt toward the rain area? They call that a beaver's tail. What's happening there is it's inflow into the storm. So it's pulling that moist air from the rain area and up. That's why that condensation is occurring, forming the cloud. That's why you've got that tilt to the rain area. The wall cloud will be rotating, and it's going to hold its position with respect to the storm. And again, that wall cloud is potentially a precursor to a funnel cloud or a tornado. And then funnel clouds are rotating columns of air extending downward from the base of a thunderstorm, but not touching the ground. And so not touching the key words there. No circulation at the surface. This was one in Panguitch. Same year as the other tornado that touched down in Panguitch. This one never quite made it to the ground, but you can just see the funnel down there. No damage, no debris, nothing at the surface. In contrast, if you see something like this, I hope we never see this in Utah. This was a Nebraska tornado. My dad was actually watching this tornado from his farm. and it was like 6 miles away. And I've actually been on the farm place, but I wish I had the video. I've got to digitize it. But the farmer here, Dave Omer, was filming this tornado. It's coming at him from the southwest. His wife is standing beside him. There's all kinds of panic going on, and this guy's just like steady as a rock, just like filming this thing. And fortunately, it goes into the roper dissipation stage just before it gets to their farm, and they were spared. But it did level a few other structures, including the Long Branch Bar, sadly, which was a hangout in Nebraska, just a couple miles from our church. When they rebuilt the bar, they named it, anybody? Twister. Okay, funnel clouds, initial stage right here is the development stage. And now this is where it's going to get interesting. So we're going to hop out of here, and I'm going to try and show you a video. I can't embed now since we had to go to Google Slides, but hopefully we won't get any unnecessary ads here.
It's tornadoes in history.
Turn out the lights.
This tornado exhibited an unusual penchant for changing both speed and direction. Forward speeds ranged from nearly stationary to over 50 miles per hour, while the direction of movement spanned over 360 degrees, looping over Interstate 40. This made safe observing at close range almost impossible. The high precipitation character of the parent thunderstorm made viewing very difficult for storm spotters and chasers. All of these factors combined to produce an incredibly dangerous situation in which many storm observers were forced to flee for their lives. Unfortunately, not everyone made it out. Among the 8 victims this storm claimed were well-known storm chasers Tim Samaras, Paul Samaras, and Carl Young, as well as at least one other storm observer. In view of this tragedy, we deem it important to document the lessons that this storm has pressed upon the chasing and spotting community.
Tornado there, and this was a really fascinating although tragic event. So that tornado was an EF5, and it was almost 2 miles wide, El Reno, Oklahoma. What got a lot of the spotters in trouble, and this is why we talk about safety, and these are expert spotters, right? These are people who do it for a living, is that the condensation funnel, what you could see of that tornado rotation was only about 1/2 to 3/4 of a mile wide. So they were taking all these angles, trying to get the footage and getting caught up in it. And 4 chase vehicles ended up being pulled into that storm, into the tornado, and with catastrophic results with the loss of life. So one of the things that created a lot of issues for our forecasters back in Indiana and Ohio as well when I was at the Cleveland office are these so-called lookalikes. So one of those being scud clouds, sort of ragged clouds. They're associated with thunderstorms. They're associated with some condensation occurring. You're getting the clouds forming. Sometimes they would be reported as wall clouds, and if we had any velocity on radar, the inclination was always to issue a tornado warning, which one time in particular I got caught and issued a tornado warning that did not verify, and we think it was probably just a scud cloud. The thing to watch with these is they're not going to be rotating, they're not going to be attached to the thunderstorm, they're eventually going to drift away from it, so just keep an eye on them. The other one to look at is virga, which is rain that's falling from the clouds but evaporating before it reaches the ground. And occasionally it can have the appearance, and that's the image on the right, of a wall cloud, but if you watch it, it's not going to be rotating. That's your clue right there. One thing about spotting at night, again, it's really difficult. You can utilize the illumination provided by lightning to see some cloud features. Again, it's not worth going outside trying to get a closer look. You can look for, if there were a tornado, flashes from transformers being hit. You can listen for the roar, but that could be straight line winds as well, or it could be hail. Just some things to keep in mind if it's nighttime. And then lightning safety, if you can hear thunder, you're close enough to be struck by lightning, just get inside. You know, if you happen to get stuck outside, hopefully that doesn't happen, but we know it does at times. If you're up on a ridge line, get off that ridge line, stay away from the taller trees, just start making your way to shelter. That's about the best you can do. Radar imagery, so I mentioned we've got quite a bit of radar imagery available via our webpage now. We have sort of a standard radar, like just the bare bones. This is where the reflectivity is, the storms, you can see them, a little bit of velocity information. We overlay our watches and our warnings, I should say, on those for severe thunderstorm warnings, tornado warnings. But you can also go to our enhanced radar page where you can actually look at quite a few weather parameters. 1 hour precipitation, storm total precipitation, a number of severe weather parameters that we look at are available. In the upper right, you see an example of a reflectivity image. So the darker reds and the whites are the most intense portions of the storm. The little notch that's extending down on the southwest portion of the storm is what we call a hook. So that's an area where you can actually see there's rotation of the storm, and that could be caused just by debris or large hail within the storm. On the lower left image is the velocity imagery. The blue colors, the cool colors like the blues and greens are toward the radar. The reds are away. You can imagine or envision a circulation. This was an EF5 tornado in Greensburg, Kansas that pretty much leveled that town back in 2007. Just another way to look at that radar imagery. So quick recap. What do we want to hear about? Tornadoes, funnel clouds, wall clouds. Make sure they're rotating. Stronger damaging winds, hail any size. Don't assume we know what's happening. I mentioned we've got a really large area of responsibility. So again, report that to the office. Any questions about severe weather before we move on to some other weather elements?
I want to bring up blizzards. Like, how often does a blizzard, like a big bad blizzard, happen like this? See in this video?
Okay, well, so in my 20 years in Salt Lake City, we've issued 1 blizzard warning, and it created quite the stir. Now, the timing of your question is awesome, because just today we considered issuing a blizzard warning for this upcoming storm for Uinta County, Wyoming. The last one we issued included the Salt Lake Valley, and I think perception varied greatly. Our transportation partners, like the Utah Department of Transportation, said, hey, we had strong winds. We had near zero visibilities for a brief period of time. We did not get as much snow out of it as we thought. It was really bad along the Idaho state line. Some of our other partners said, you overwarned. Like, what were you doing? Like, I just got up and I went to work the next day, and everything was supposedly going to be closed, but then it turned out that there were not significant impacts. But to me, they can't happen here, and especially in the higher terrain, right? So we really we wouldn't consider a blizzard warning up in the mountains. It happens all the time up there. Winds will be gusting 70, 80, 90 miles an hour. You can't see anything near whiteout conditions. I've been at the top of Snowbird before looking like, thinking like, how am I gonna get down? I don't know the terrain that well. So do they happen? Yes. Do they happen in the metro areas? Not that often here. They're more common once you get into Wyoming and the plains, more open areas. I'm not to say there aren't open areas out in the West Deserts, but it's just the right combination. Those storms really intensifying as they're moving out through the plains. So I was in Nebraska, I saw many blizzards. So it's kind of like eye of the beholder, I think, here. But yeah, we actually kicked the idea around for Uinta County, Wyoming, because the Idaho offices do have some blizzard warnings, and I think there's a couple small areas in Wyoming as well where they went blizzard warning, and the rest of the higher terrain ended up being a winter storm warning issued this afternoon. But they do happen. But blizzards in general, think winds 35 miles an hour stronger, some snow, blowing snow, near zero visibility is whiteout conditions. That's a blizzard. Yeah.
One of the TV meteorologists a couple of nights ago said that a blizzard warning will only be issued when it's going to last 3 hours or more. Is that true?
Yeah, technically it should be 3 hours or more. Mm-hmm. For the shorter fused events, what you're seeing, and we saw this a couple nights ago, are snow squall warnings. Yeah, so the snow squall warnings are a relatively new product, specifically put in place for like these cold frontal passages where you have that 1 to 2 hour bursts with snow, blowing snow near whiteout conditions, just like 2 nights ago where winds gusted to 55 knots at the airport while it was snowing. And the idea there is, and they actually get activated, like you may have seen your phones go off with the wireless emergency alert. They can get into the emergency alert system potentially as well. So we tend to give those a lot of attention because there have been too many multiple vehicle pileups with fatalities from these snow squall type events.
It was actually pretty funny. My phone went off, but 30 seconds before my phone went off, I was watching TV, and 30 seconds before my phone went off, the crew on the set of the TV news had their phones going off. It was kind of embarrassing for them.
And it'll be in silent mode, but yeah, that tone just comes through. And actually, those wireless emergency alerts, you could get those for tornado warnings, flash flood warnings, if they have the right tags associated with them. Obviously, like for hurricane warnings, if you're living on the coast. But the idea was a lot of people aren't necessarily in tune to the weather for a variety of reasons. And so if there's something that's really imminent, life-threatening, it's one way to get information to people pushed right to them so they don't have to tune in to a news source or a web page to get weather information.
Yeah, the snow. Yeah, you heard about last year's buffalo snow?
Yeah.
That was terrible, man. About like 6 feet high of snow.
Yeah, incredible totals. Lake effect is, well, we get lake effect, but then there's lake effect that comes off the Great Lakes, and longer fetch, deeper lakes for the most part. Well, all deeper. Long-lasting, the orientation of the lakes creates some interesting features, and it can really pile up. And Buffalo, in particular, Tug Hill area is notorious for that. But when I was in Indiana, we got a little bit of it. When I was in Cleveland, yeah, a fair amount off Lake Erie. Sometimes from Lake Huron across Lake Erie and then into northern Ohio. Certainly up Lake Erie, and then of course if you're in New York State, up Lake Ontario. Big events though. Lower density snow for the most part, but yeah, fun to deal with for sure. Here, it's tough to predict them. It's actually easier to predict lake effect snow events in the east because of the orientation of the lakes than it is here with the sort of a smaller lake with an island in the middle, and kind of challenging out here. We do our best though.
What would the clouds look like say, in that kind of a disastrous snow? Like a buffalo snow, to know that's going to happen.
Well, you'll see it here too, like the lowering. Boy, I should actually include a few images from some lake effect bands, but you'll see that, like it'll be lower. You'll see the reduced visibility in the distance, and then you'll have the vertical development. So it's sort of a convective element because you're feeding off the relatively warmer waters of the lake, really cold air aloft, and like. The other night was not purely a lake effect with the snow squall, but we actually had thundersnow. We had lightning with that band moving down with the front, but you can have lightning with lake effect snow bands as well if you get enough vertical development. All right, let's jump into flooding, flash flooding. This is the Lower Enterprise Dam back in the flooding 2005 when the Santa Clara River was eroding the banks and homes were falling into the river. Flooding along the Virgin River as well. They were worried this dam was going to fail, so our hydrologist, Brian McInerney, and I were asked to come down. We took a look at the dam, flew up in a helicopter, which is pretty cool, got right up by the dam, and we're getting a nice view, and then realized, the pilot goes, I think we're starting to ice up. We probably should get out of here. I'm like, thank you. But fortunately, the dam did not fail. That's just one type of flooding we have. Like last year we had an incredible snowpack. We had some mainstream river flooding, relatively rare in Utah. We got lucky. We took a lot of that snowpack off in a very orderly fashion. It could have been much, much worse than it was. But still, there's a federal disaster declaration for the flooding. for 6 counties, I believe, in total. But then we have events like this in Capitol Gorge.
That's my employer. Yes? No, he's not.
Are you a Rocky Mountain Power customer? How would you like to get paid to put a backup battery in?
I don't believe in that vehicle. There were some people that got carried in their vehicles a little bit, but again, fortunately, no loss of life with that event.
Yeah, I saw one video with a porta potty just like floating in front of somebody's house.
That's not pretty for a couple of reasons. Okay, one more flood video for you. This one I find entertaining.
National Weather Service in Denver has issued a flash flood warning. Heavy rainfall will cause extensive and severe flooding of creeks, streams, roads, and culverts. This is a life-threatening situation. If you encounter flood waters, turn around. Don't drown.
So, well, I don't know about the bike. Yeah, so what could possibly go wrong when you combine flash flooding with country music and a motorcycle rider?
Probably said somebody hold a beer before you start.
I think alcohol was maybe involved too.
You know, just an awesome video. I got to give props to my brother in Denver who discovered that one and sent it to me. And for a while, I lost access to it. Technically, we probably shouldn't be showing it, but it's pretty entertaining. So, okay. Yeah, so back to a little bit more of a serious tone. So, you know, we already covered watches, warnings, and advisories, so we'll just jump into what to report. Flooding, rapidly rising water we want to hear about, right? And usually high or flowing faster than normal water, water that's getting close to bank full, or approaching structures or roads. an inch or more rainfall in a short period of time, any flooding, debris flows or rock slides. That's what we want to hear about. And the idea is get that information to us before it becomes life-threatening. Watch for storms moving across an area. We call it training when they develop over and over and again move across the same area. Again, don't assume we know what's happening. Marine weather, and we're getting close to the end here, so I don't know if we have any hard cutoffs, but we'll move pretty quickly through these. Basically what you want to hear about, if you happen to be on the water, winds and waves impacting craft, water spouts, which you often get in the fall when the warm waters are sort of setting an instability and you've got these cold air systems with some sort of a circulation above it, dense fog impacting safe operations on the areas of water. And just be careful, this is Lake Powell where you dock your boat, like if you're trying to avoid rough waves and strong winds, just know that if you end up in the wrong area, there is a lot of debris that is carried down from the rivers that are dropping into Lake Powell, and you can end up swamping your boat in a hurry. Fire weather, important things we want to hear about. Wildfire starts, we want to know if that happens. Chances are somebody from a land management agency is going to report it to us, but the earlier the lead time we get, the better, so we can start looking at the very detailed weather for that area and figure out how to support the firefighters moving into that region, let them know where the winds are going to be coming from, how strong the winds are going to be, is there additional lightning. All these things pose hazards to firefighters, whether on the ground or in aircraft. Smoke reducing visibilities to less than 2 miles. Weather pattern information like wind shifts, we definitely want to hear about that. Winter weather, right? So here we are. We're into it again. We've got another storm coming into the region. Tonight, actually, in the mountains. Tomorrow, it'll be starting up here in the Salt Lake Valley. Love snowfall accumulations, and they're really popular online as well. But if you've got, how much snow fell and over what period of time, when the snow began or ended, that's good information for us. Don't worry so much about that next bullet when it reached warning level. We'll figure that out. So the snowfall accumulation is what you're getting from that storm. The snow depth is the total amount of snow that's accumulated on the ground. So that could be over weeks and weeks, as in the case last year, where up at my house, I got to about a 6 to 7 foot snow depth at one point in my backyard. Precipitation type is really important. So is it rain at a certain elevation and snow at a certain elevation? So rain is to snow if you're going up the hill, or snow to rain if you're coming down the hill. Helps us calibrate our snowfall forecasts. Freezing rain, so that's rain that's falling and then freezing upon contact with the surface. We definitely want to hear about that, even though it's rare here. All really good information. And this was actually in my neighborhood back in the winter of 2007 and 2008, where it was getting pretty deep, although not quite to the extent of last year. A little bit about safety, just awareness, know what weather hazards could happen on a given day. You guys are all about communication. I don't worry about that. Know your escape routes. If you do happen to be out following a storm or just happen to be in an area where storms are crossing the region, know your safe zones. Basically to the south of the storm is with a decent vantage point is a good rule of thumb. There's a lot of information if you go online for safety information, if you're concerned about that. The National Seasonal Safety Campaign graphics, the URL is there to the page. Lots of good infographics, social media posts, if that's something you want to share as a group. This was the weather company car that caught in that El Reno tornado. Fortunately, the weather company people survived it. The airbags deployed. They were okay, unlike the 4 other individuals. The information, how to report it, is all here. Again, that's on that orangish colored sheet I passed out. We love video. We love images. Just make sure that you're safe when you're getting it. And then there's some additional training as well. So you can go online. These are free of charge through the COMET program. The URL is there. There's 2 modules that are built into the Skywarn Spotter training. These are a little bit more focused on traditional severe weather. If you take the test and you pass it, I will get a notification. I've already spoken to you, but for other folks that maybe aren't here tonight, haven't signed the spotter registration form, completed that, then I'll find out and I'll reach out to them as well and get them trained up. And then there's my contact information as well. So you can send me an email And our webpage is on there. We also have a spotter page with some of these resources that I've covered tonight. And I'll leave it at that. And that's what I've got. And I think I may have gone a little bit long, but appreciate the questions and the interaction.
Thank you, Kevin.
Could you leave that last slide up for a second?
Sure. Yeah, I can leave that up.
All right.
While we do the
Did
drawing, I guess.
everybody get a ticket in the bucket? You didn't raise your hand. If you want a second, no. Okay. Been a lot of good information and some very interesting pictures and whatnot. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we got 7. So, Linda, go ahead. Okay. Get these organized. Let's see, there's 3. Okay, no particular order, the prizes are right there. KG7JYR, Jim Kraft, G. White, WB7, TGP Laird, Bruce KC7, DGN, Blaze, Olhurst, and WJ3RI. All right. I want to thank you for coming out and appreciate everybody that's come out tonight. And we want to see you next time, February 8th, same place. And we're going to be talking about the 14662 repeater setup. And I hope he's got pictures because the place is interesting. And don't forget the meeting before the meeting at Village Inn next month. It is interesting to sit and listen to the stories that everybody has. That is at 5:30 at the Village Inn on 4th South, 9th and 4th. On these white papers, let's turn them into Kevin so you guys can participate in Skywarn. We'll see you next week, or next month, I mean.